So let's go on then. So some of this is going to be slightly repetitive, but it's going to be in more detail about what the benefits of the BMU, the British Musicians Union, are to members. So, essential stuff, been through this already. Pay bargaining, legal advice, contract advice, copyright advice, insurances, and health and safety. We've got people that are trained in health and safety. They're accredited with health and safety, government sort of accreditation, to go into venues, look at the lighting, look at the sound rig, and make sure that it's all safe, make sure the temperatures are right, make sure everything is working for the musicians. Essential services, campaigning and lobbying. So I'll come on to the political lobbying a little bit. But high-profile campaigns. This campaign I mentioned yesterday, this work not play, where musicians complained about, been put upon, been, you know, almost blackmailed into working for free because it was a good cause, it was a good organisation, and you know they shouldn't charge a fee even though everybody else is getting paid. And it was kind of respect for the profession of musician. That's been a great campaign that we've had. Well, we've had other ones. We have campaigns, one about new music education at the moment, that we want music education to be more accessible to kids from all backgrounds. We want really good quality tutors, and what we've done is bring the tutors together in certain parts of the country into cooperatives. So they're looking after themselves, they're administering themselves, they're actually self-help groups. And when a parent wants a teacher, they go to the cooperative, rather than, you know, look in the phone book or something. So they get somebody who's got to sort of got accredited. And public awareness campaigns. We've got a public awareness campaign we're just about to start in the UK, and that's about government support for the arts, because there have been lots of cutbacks, and the arts are one of the things they cut straight away. And, you know, this takes away, it's what I was saying, that arts and culture is part of the society. I think it's a duty of governments to support arts and culture, and particularly their local art and culture, their own endemic art and culture. But the UK government and lots of other governments don't see it that way. And they want to rely on philanthropic, of rich people giving money to their certain pet organisations. And this is not good for the business, because we want an infrastructure to grow. So we want public awareness about, people love music, they really love music. They don't understand about the infrastructure of the music industry and how fragile it is and how it needs support. So we bang on about that. And I say bang on, it's a long job. I mentioned this before, we've got to, a lot of the communications to our members is to give them information about what's happening. You'll see in that magazine that's in the pack that there's some really interesting articles about various people, but there's a lot of information, up-to-date information about what they need to know to go about their own business as a musician. Training, professional development. This is something that hardly exists for a musician. And interestingly, the top bullet point there I put is stagecraft. Because, you know, it's not just a question of picking up your instrument. You've got to look right on stage. And I'm sure Keith, as a manager, would have experienced a lot of this, when the bands don't think that's part of the thing. It's not going back to the 1940s where they all put on the same jacket and they all had kind of a uniform. But there are certain ways you've got to treat your audience with respect, for a start. Or maybe the Sex Pistols didn't, but you know, it's a general thing that you have to do. Self-promotion, you've got to be able to learn how to promote your band. You've got to be able to use, these days, social media to promote the band. You've got to be able to get out there. You've got to develop your fan base. Merchandising, we've spoken quite a lot about. Very important these days. Touring, you need to get a touring infrastructure. Usually that's quite difficult for bands to do on their own. So what we do, we point them to directions, then direction of promoters. They might promote tours. And they can go as support acts often. And we can actually make the introductions and get them doing that sort of, and doing some quite interesting tours. And public relations, PR, you know, the general stuff, just getting information out there to the fans, doing blogs. People have a thirst for information, even if it seems stupid and puerile. They want to know, you know, so tell them what you have for breakfast. Tell them what you're doing next week, where you're going for your holiday. Little things like that. And they're self-evident, but you know, you've got to tell people how to run their careers. So then we give financial advice. We talked about tax a bit as well. We tell musicians they've got to pay their taxes if they're going to be part of society. If they're going to get something back from the government, they've got to put something in. So we talk about how they keep their records. We actually give them classes in that. We have sessions on that, workshops. We talk about how they're going to have to invest, and their investments are mainly in themselves, their equipment, and how they make sure that they've got the best equipment they can get. And access to funding. There is access to funding for bands. There are regional development boards. There are the banks that they can go to. They've got to ask the question. 9 times out of 10 they'll get turned away. But that 1 time out of 10 they might get some funding, which really helps and assists them. And the continuing professional development, I think I mentioned yesterday, when we can actually bring them in and we can talk about how they develop their careers as musicians, how they sustain their careers as musicians. So we've got around the country maybe 1 a week of these sessions going on in various places. We try and repeat them when we've got a winning formula across the country. And people do travel quite a long way to get in there. This is just some of the campaigns we've had. Keep music live, you've got the button. I mean, that's, despite we've been talking about recording, you've got to have live musicians to record. What you don't want to do is have a machine doing it. We're not all that keen on computer-generated music, although it has its place, I have to say. Support My Music Teacher was an interesting one. That was kind of people who they often have one teacher who really inspired them. Somebody that really put them on the right track. And you've got to recognise that, and they ought to celebrate that, and we've actually tried to do that. Let It Be was the BBC campaign when the government was really attacking the BBC last year. BBC's, there's the biggest employer of professional musicians in the UK. It has the most incredible cross-section of genres, even though we complain about it bitterly and we argue with them a lot. It gives an unparalleled music service, and we want it to remain that way. They commission new works, lots of new works from composers. It's one of the biggest commissioners of new works in the world. It supports festivals. It actually brings music into the house. We think there's not enough music on television, and we'd rather have it. The radio services of the BBC are pretty good. They've got 3 designated music services. 4 actually, there's one digital one called 6 Music, which has been very successful. So Radio's 1, which is a kind of younger people's one. Radio 2, Keith was mentioning yesterday, very popular across the age groups. Radio 3, which is classical, but it does world music and jazz as well. And Radio 6 Music, which is very quirky. It does everything, and to a really high standard, and music you don't normally listen to. So we joined with the rest of the music industry to try and make sure that we kept the BBC the way it was. Creating Without Conflict is an interesting one, because this was to do with we joined with the other unions on this one, and there's a lot of pressure on artists when they're performing, and it can come from directors in classical music, it can come from conductors. Actors get put under a lot of pressure to do things. There's bullying that goes on within the arts, and this is sort of raising awareness of it. In fact, even we do a lot of work with the journalists union, and they were saying how they get pressure at work to deliver for certain deadlines by their editors. And this is not pleasant. This is not pleasantly saying deliver it by tomorrow morning. These are threats. So we've raised the profile of that. So there are all sorts of areas that the unions can get involved in, and we do it with colleagues as well. So the legal assistance, the legal advice, most of the stuff we do is breaches of contract. I've already said it's when they don't get paid. That's the simple breach of contract. Copyright infringement, we follow that up, and we actually do have a good success rate on that. And defamation, we've actually done quite a few defamation cases when somebody says, oh, that band's rubbish, which they're entitled to say, but when they say it publicly on a website or something, there are various things, degrees of how people treat each other. We've got to be very careful when it's one lot of members defaming or breaching the contract of another lot of members. We try and do this without going to the court, because the worst thing you can do is get before a judge and say, well, you're all members of the musicians union, can't you sort this out? And then there's somebody like me saying, well, they're not reasonable, they won't agree. So we've got people that are trained in mediation and dispute resolution. banging heads together. It really is telling them to grow up sometimes and to get on with it, because the worst thing for them to do is to get before the courts and everybody loses, except the lawyers, of course. You've heard about this. This is the stuff that we advise on. We actually taught them about how to find work, how to make themselves available, session work, and then the final bullet point is the equitable remuneration, which is a very good source of income. We make sure that they register with PPL to get that money. They've got to actually mandate PPL before they can actually acquire it. So we give them advice on using new technologies, not new anymore, as I said, streaming downloads, YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, Pandora in the States, and the question marks mean what's next? We don't know, but we have to be prepared, and we try and be fleet of foot and to anticipate what the members are going to have to deal with next. It's difficult. We do end up a bit like those guys in the 1920s when they dealt with talking pictures and they tried to stop them. You're not going to do that anymore. That's not the way it's going to happen. The insurances I touched on before, I'll go into more detail now. Public liability is insisted on by lots of venues in the UK. Now, when a band goes to work in, say, a hotel, so it's doing a gig, it's doing a wedding, the band has to provide its own public liability insurance. And this is really quite serious, because we've had incidents when this insurance has been used where an amplifier stack fell off the stage, hit a member of the public, the band's liable. We had another one, a really bizarre one, when the band were working in a big hotel in the centre of London, but they weren't given any changing area. They had gear to put on, and they were told, use this corridor, typical, where they treat the bands, So they were used to it. They got their instrument cases, they kind of put their band shirts on, whatever it was. But they needed a bit of extra space. And there was one of these big trolleys where they stack the dirty plates and all the rest of it on. And they had wheels with brakes. So one of the musicians kicked the brakes off, moved this trolley away so he could get his guitar case down there, didn't put the brakes back on. So later in the evening, the band were performing, everything was happening at this dinner dance, everyone was having a good time. And this woman, who'd had a little bit too many glasses of wine or champagne, was looking for the ladies' restroom. And she mistook the door and she went out of the door towards the kitchens. She dislodged this trolley, it banged into her and broke a rib. The band was liable, but they were covered by this insurance. Just another story about that. We had a big country house in the English countryside. We're having this very sort of nice event. I think it was an art gallery, and they were selling pictures to rich clients. And they employed a harpist, and she was there, very elegant, playing the harp to all the people milling around on this sunny afternoon. She took a break, and she went for a walk around the grounds. Now, people can't resist plucking the strings of a harp when it's sitting there by itself. They go up and mess with it. So this member of the public went up and started to sort of tinkle away on the strings. I don't know if you know about harps, but they overbalance very easily. The centre of gravity is very difficult on the harp. It fell over and it hit a painting, which had a glass front to it, and it completely ripped the painting. Now, this painting was an 18th century sort of valuable work of art. The insurance covered her. So she was done. So all of this is provided as part of their membership fee, and the limit on it is £5 million. It's the kind of thing you hope nobody's going to use, but when you hear these stories, it could happen to anybody. These things just happen. So it's a pretty good benefit. And I think for a band to get that insurance individually, they'd be paying about £500 per gig almost for the band members. The only stipulation we say is they're only covered if all of the band belong to the musicians' union. That's right, you have to cover it.
So what you actually obtain the insurance for your members? Okay.
Yeah, we do a deal with one of the big insurance companies through a brokers we've got. And it's quite an outlay that we have to spend for the policy every year. But it's proved it's worth every penny as far as we're concerned. And it gives them something tangible back. They're not all going to use the legal services because, most people work for legitimate engagers. But they all could potentially need this.
So the
This is covered in the £200
Yeah.
a year?
Yeah, it's all covered in that. So it's a pretty good benefit of belonging to the union. The equipment insurance is something we developed. So what we give them is, if they're a member, they get up to £2,000 insurance free as part of the membership. They can go to the people that we use for the insurances and top that up if they've got really valuable equipment. And this is great. This is used quite a lot. It's used for repairs, because when things get... we had a trumpet player got his instrument knocked over and badly dented and all the rest of it. It wasn't expensive. It was a couple of £100 to repair, not into thousands, but that was covered. He was covered. So, yeah, it's a valuable... equipment insurance is a valuable sort of benefit. Personal accident, we've had a number of these. You know, musicians work weird hours. We've had a couple of people involved in car accidents late at night, whether they're falling asleep or whatever at the wheel, or with other members of the public. So we've got some lawyers on retainer who'll do those cases for them, and we've had quite a lot, surprising amount of cases. And then we provide cut price travel insurance. Obviously, it's travel insurance tailored to people working in music. Because you go to a high street shop, you go to somebody, you get out the phone book, and they don't really realise what you're doing and the kind of work you're doing. These are specialists. And medical insurance when they're working in other territories as well. So it's a pretty comprehensive package. So yeah, we mentioned most of this for live performances already. Let's go on to the lobbying now. We've got a parliamentary group that we administer jointly with those other unions I mentioned before, Equity and the Writers Guild. So the three, we call ourselves the Performers Alliance, and we have a parliamentary group, and we've got about 80 MPs and about 25, 30 members of the House of Lords. So over 100 parliamentarians who belong to the group. Now we hold meetings of the group. We provide speakers for them. We did a whole session on streaming. We got the guys from Spotify to come along, talk to the MPs. We got guys from arts funding organisations to come along to talk to them. We're going to have a session soon, and I'm going to be doing a lot of this, about royalties, because they don't understand. We talked a lot the last 2 days, different strands of royalties. A royalty is not a simple thing. It can come from all sorts of different sources. Now, MPs don't know about that, you know. They need to understand the industry a lot more. So we've got this group of MPs who are friends, and we can call on, and we sort of, you know, we give them a party every Christmas. They're like that. And we make sure that we've got this turnover of people that understand the industry issues and will work for us. And I think that's got to be done. This doesn't happen overnight, but if you can get one friendly MP, one friendly politician, it'll grow after that. And you need them. We all need them. Trade Union Network, I mentioned the TUC in the UK, it's the Trade Union Congress, it's all of the unions. So through them, we belong to them, and through them we can lobby on general issues like pension issues, like sort of looking at public services, health services, education across the board, not specifically to do with music, but general stuff that helps all working people. So we get involved with that. And I'm on the executive committee of the TUC, which is about 20 general secretaries like me. We make sure we have regular one-to-one meetings with politicians as well as the group. So we'll arrange to meet politicians that are willing to talk to us. There's a new Minister of Culture in the UK, just been appointed since Theresa May took over in the debacle after Brexit. We'll see if she'll talk to us. Often the Conservative politicians don't want to talk to the unions. They try and stay away. But we'll talk to if the Labour Party in the UK get its act together, we'll talk to somebody there. But at the moment, you don't know who to talk to. And we are continually issuing press releases and media releases about whatever issue we're dealing with at the moment. So we kind of have a department, small department, 3 people who have contact with specialist music journalists, but with ordinary, I say ordinary journalists, but more political journalists who actually put things out when we talk about the state of the arts and the state of our members and what we're looking for. So that was a kind of whistle-stop tour about what services we can offer. And, you know, I just got to emphasise again what I said before. This is sophisticated. This didn't happen overnight. I've been in charge for 15 years. We've developed things like the public liability and the equipment insurance since then. But the other things, we've been doing for years and years and years. This is kind of organic. It grows. Every now and again, you can add to it. You do it at no cost if you can. So you're not putting the money up for the members. There's a ceiling of how much you can actually charge them. And it's continually looking to be inventive and to reinvent yourself, really. And what you've got to be is relevant to the members. You've got to be relevant to the musicians. And I think that's, so you've got to know what's going on in the music business. You've got to know how musicians earn their money. And you can't be complacent about this because it changes. And it's changed throughout the 15 years I've been doing it. It's changed immensely. And it will change for the next person who does it after me. And I think you've got to be relevant. You've got to be able to speak the language of the contemporary musician just as much as the sort of 70-year-old jazz player who doesn't like rock and pop very much and thinks that we waste our time in them. So it's an operation that's good. It's an operation that's sort of successful. It's kind of tenuous. What we've tried to do is keep our independence as a musicians' union. Lots of other unions have gone into bigger ones. They've amalgamated to bigger groups, So there's a little department of some big union that actually deals with performers. We don't want that. We want our own distinct identity, and we want to be regarded as, it's very old-fashioned to talk about a craft union, but this is a craft. This is a real skill, and we're talking about not just the stars, we're talking about what I call artisan musicians, workaday musicians who are jobbing musicians, earn their living, and they need representing. So it's, it's a continual battle, but it's quite fulfilling. I quite enjoy it, and but I'll be handing on next year. I'm going to retire from the British Musicians Union next year. I'll carry on as chair of PPL for a few more years, I hope, and I'll carry on as president of FIM for I've been elected until 2020, so that's a while. So thanks for listening. I don't know if you've got any questions, or I think this is the opportunity to mop up on the whole of the session as well. I'll be in the hands of you, Erica and David, for that.
Sorry. I wanted to know, other than the support for teachers, music teachers, and support for the BBC, if you could maybe speak to a few of your priority lobbying areas or areas of concern.
Yeah, well, the BBC is kind of done and dusted now because there's been a settlement with the government, so we parked that one. It was a big campaign last year, and it's only just been resolved. The teachers one is a big issue, and that's still going on because music education in the UK, particularly teaching people to perform, to sing or to play instruments, is under great pressure, and it has been for a number of years, and it's not getting any better. So that's something we'll carry on with for a long while. One of the big things we talk to them about is access to finance and making regarding self-employed musicians as small enterprises. They put things back into the economy and giving them access for their own, I think it was in the Status of the Artist presentation, research and development. Governments are very keen on that, but somehow they don't regard it as a proper profession yet. And we're trying to really push this, that this is, the creative industries are massively important. You take the UK, music industry is incredibly important. It's not just about the money that comes through the economy, it's the reputation of the artists, it's the kudos, it feeds the tourist industry. People go to Liverpool to look at venues there, they go around country to festivals. So we're continually pushing issues like that. But I think what the main issue is recognition of the importance of arts and culture. And I think we'll carry on doing that. It's not something that's immediately on a politician's agenda. It doesn't win a lot of votes, I don't think,
I just noticed in your statement to members of 2015 that there's money allocated for a pension fund. Is that a pension fund for the members?
There are two pension funds we've got. One is for the staff, of course, and we have one for the members as well. We've got an agreement with the independent television production companies, with the BBC, with some of the opera houses. We've got 6 opera houses in the UK have full-time musicians, and they pay in via the union into a fund. So again, we act as this kind of clearinghouse. So yeah, so it's kind of small beer. It's not a really big fund, but potentially it's something that should grow. Because, you know, I always say that we work very hard at getting people into the business and developing their careers. We're not very good at getting them out of the business and retiring, you know, with dignity.
So that kicks in when they become a retirement age?
Yeah. And I think they can collect it when they're 65.
When they're 65?
Yeah. And they can carry on working. They get
for
taxed
so
on.
many years?
No.
So
You just have to have a
and
pot of money. Yeah.
You could join at 60 and...
Yeah, you won't have much money in the pot, but yeah.
Oh, it builds over the years.
Builds over the years, yeah.
Proportionately to
Yeah.
being there.
Yeah. But it's potentially, it's very important, yeah.
In the case of Barbadian artists, I find a lot of artists want the opportunity to go outside of Barbados and perform. And you had mentioned before that your union helps with the connection, sending. So how do you do that?
We give them advice about touring, about what they should look out for. That's in many ways the easy thing. But we've also, through the Federation, we've got a network of organisations around the world. If they get into trouble, so if there's a British musician working in the States, they can actually get in touch with the AFM if they've got a problem. And this might be a problem. We had, where were they from? We had some European musicians, I think from Hungary, working in Manchester, and they needed a piano tuner. They got to the venue, the piano was terrible, they wanted to use. And so we provided one, you know, we got somebody. So there's an infrastructure when people are away from home. Also, if things go wrong and somebody gets ill, we can liaise, and we can liaise with their body in their own country to see what we can do about it. And we've done that. So there's a kind of network. So they've got to know they're supported wherever they go. I've got to say, the touring circuit for musicians is pretty good around the world. I was involved in some similar sessions as these in the Philippines a number of years ago, and we had actors and dancers and singers and instrumentalists there, so we're doing all performers. And there's some really ridiculous, for dancers it's really terrible. It's when they get on a cruise liner and these, I can't remember which country, I think Japan, and they take the passports off them, is the first thing they do, so you're trapped. And they, you know, it's almost, I mean, it's appalling. And these are young people who are very vulnerable. So we kind of have a network of people watching out for them at ports and all the rest of it. So I keep saying that the entertainment business is a risky business, and there's all sorts of risks. And all you can do is just tell people about best practice, what to watch out for. But yeah, there's a support mechanism.
Yes, I wanted to speak to the lobbying, and I noticed you had the two sections there of lobbying with the government, and I'm thinking to myself, well, how are you getting that first section of the group that you, so to speak, are vetting? How are you going about creating the lobbyers?
It was a bit of it. Forming the group was a bit of each. We started by announcing it, and we had a session. We got some artists, we got some actors actually to come along and talk to them. Musicians don't like making speeches, and actors do, so we relied on them. And you know, we got about 6 or 7 to that first meeting. They all joined up, word spread. We do mail shots out to them. We put on events. We had a particular event where we had, in association with PPL, we did some jazz sessions, and the jazz awards that we had there. So, and you get the politicians interested, and maintaining the interest is difficult. So you've got to keep going on about it. But yeah, and then we get our own friends. We get relationships with politicians, and our members know them, and they say, you ought to phone so and so, and we do.
Yes. Can I just add that I think one thing which is international is that politicians enjoy being associated with famous people. So when you're in music, when you're in acting, you tell politicians they're going to be famous people present at an event, they will turn up. Politicians are very, very good at seeking publicity vicariously. So, if you have committed musicians, committed actors, they will get politicians along to events, and that's when you start to befriend them.
Yes, when you tell the politicians, make sure you bring your camera. There's going to be a camera opportunity. They love having their pictures taken with some actress they're seen on the television. They're all smiles. And then you collar them and you talk about the issue that you want. We're coming into the final stretch.